Hey guys, it's Andre from High Performance Academy. Welcome along to this week's webinar. This week we're going to be talking about a topic that I know a lot of tuners, both professional and novice alike, have a lot of trouble with, and that is getting good quality stable boost control. Today we're going to be specifically looking at boost control strategies within the Haltech Elite 2500 ECU. Obviously we're going to be using our Subaru version 11 STI for that demonstration, and specifically we are also going to be dealing with open loop boost control, but we'll get into all of that once we actually get started with our webinar. Before we do, I just want to catch you up with a few things that we have been focusing on around here over the last week or so. And again, some of you who have been following us regularly, this will probably sort of overlap a little bit. Some of the stuff I'm going to talk about I touched on last week, but the first product I want to talk about is the Tuner Nerd Knock Monitor Pro. And I'd only just received this last week and got a chance to get stuck into it, and really hadn't got a chance to get it going. I'll just show you the Tuner Nerd Knock Monitor Pro here. So this is the unit, comes with a wiring harness as well that goes into your engine bay and attaches to your knock sensor. As well as that, it also will connect to either an ignition coil or a injector to get an RPM pulse. You've got the option as well of adding manifold pressure and air fuel ratio into this, so it is quite fully featured. And for any of you who have followed us for a while, anyone who's taken any of our courses, you'll know that I'm a really strong advocate for using quality audio knock detection when you are tuning, regardless whether that's on the dyno or out on the road. And one of the problems that we constantly get asked about is where can people purchase good quality knock detection equipment that isn't going to break the bank. Now, maybe not such an issue for a professional tuner who's going to be tuning several cars every week. Obviously, the expense of a quality knock detection system quickly pays for itself. But if you're only thinking about tuning maybe your own car, you do need to think a little bit more about the unit you're going to be using. Now, around here at HPA, the two units that I generally rely on are the Plex Knock Monitor version 2 and the Link G4 Plus Knock Block. Both of those have got their own pros and cons. The Plex Knock Monitor, very full featured, a lot of functionality on that unit, but it is quite expensive. The Link G4 Plus Knock Block, on the other hand, that's kind of my quick and easy go-to, much cheaper unit, very simple in that all it does is gives you audio knock output. However, the Tuner Nerd Knock Monitor Pro is one of those products that we have been asked about for a fair while, because it does on paper give a pretty impressive feature list. Off the top of my head, somewhere in the region of about $300 US plus some freight. There are a couple of different packages, depending on exactly what you need. So on top of the audio knock detection, and basically there is a little headphone jack on the side of the unit. This actually goes into your laptop, and this is where the Tuner Nerd probably offers some pretty high-end functionality without a huge price tag. So it allows you, the software, to analyze the frequency being output from the knock sensor. You can then listen in as well, so you've got an audible trace. You've got the ability to set the frequency that it's going to be looking at to suit whatever engine you're dealing with. So long story short, once we've got it up and running, if we head across to my laptop screen, this is the sort of results we got. This is a very quick test with me purposely inducing some knock on this exact Vision 11 STI. So just to quickly show you what we've got here, up the top on the left here, we've got the frequency input, or the noise signal I should say, coming into the laptop software. And what we can see quickly here is, as we go from left to right here, we're going through a ramp run, and you can see the amplitude of that noise signal does increase. What we can see here is these little erratic spikes, and these are indicative of knock occurring. Now what we can do here is set the frequency for the system to work at, and you can start by just choosing your bore diameter. In this case, the EJ engine that we're running, the 2-litre engine, has a 92mm bore, and that sets the upper and lower frequencies. So basically just helps the unit avoid some of the background noise, improving that signal to noise ratio. And then on the right hand side, and this is the cool bit here, during a ramp run, what it's going to do is sample the noise versus RPM. So at the moment we've got this hooked up to an injector output, so we've got that RPM trace, so that's important. That's giving us the RPM axis on the bottom here. Need to obviously make sure that's accurate as well. And so the idea here is what we want to do is produce a ramp run on the dyno there where we're not getting any knock activity, and we can confirm this as well with the audio aspect of the knock monitor. And what we can then do is actually press a button on this, which will generate this white line, which we can see here, a little bit erratic here, which I'll explain in a second. And this is basically a background noise threshold. So this is the normal noise threshold of the engine when no knock is occurring. Now, I said it's slightly irregular because this little blip here, we actually had one very light hit of knock occur right at about 6,000 RPM. So that's why there is that little bump there. And realistically, what I should have done is gone back and removed some timing from that spot, made sure that we've got no knock activity, and then produced another run again. However, for the purposes of our test, it works just fine. And what we can see here is after advancing the timing 3 degrees in the top end, we can see that we've got a lot of knock activity, and that's shown here graphically, as well as we can see it in the actual amplitude trace as well, which I've already mentioned. And what the unit does as well, this is configurable, it will actually give you a very different audible ping when knock is occurring, so it's absolutely impossible for you to ignore that. So far with my brief testing, admittedly brief testing, it's actually been pretty impressive for the price point. There are a couple of things that I am a little bit nervous about, just because I've been through it before. In particular, the connector that goes into the body of the unit here. I fear that for professional use, where this is going to be in and out of multiple cars every week, that connector may not end up lasting the test of time. Obviously, some care is going to go a long way to giving it a long lifespan, and certainly if you are only using it on 1 or 2 vehicles, probably no issue at all. And the other aspect here is that because it is fairly fully featured, and we do have that RPM input to hook up, there is a little bit more involved in actually getting the unit installed, hooked up and ready to go. Of course, that's going to pay dividends because it does give you a fairly thorough analysis of what's going on. So we will probably be producing some more thorough content around that unit in the not too distant future, so stay tuned to our social media channels or our forum as well. I'll be posting about it in there, and we'll let you know everything that we find about it. Now, I just want to give you another update on our FD RX7 project, because that's kind of been consuming most of my time outside of our practical diesel tuning course production. And what we're doing at the moment is just getting the last parts of the wiring sub-harnesses designed up so that we can have them completed. Once the wiring harness is complete, we've got some basic fabrication left to do, and we should just about have this thing ready to run. And what I want to do is just go over some of the things that I've been focusing on this week. So we'll just shoot back to my laptop screen, and this is a shot that I actually showed last week, which is our CJ Motorsport's fuel rail kit. So it can be a little bit tricky with the FD RX7 adapting conventional top feed injectors to fit, particularly with the primary rails, which is the one we can see down here. The primary injectors being side feed, it makes it really difficult to easily adapt a conventional top feed injector into that. Obviously, the stock injectors aren't going to be much good for the power aims we are looking for. So what we've done is we've gone with a fairly conventional choice here with a set of Injector Dynamics ID 1300 primaries, a set of ID 1700, which is in the secondaries, which is the top rail, which we can see here. So that all adapts really nicely, makes it literally plug and play to get those injectors into the 13B engine. However, there is a few more considerations to the fuel system, obviously, than just our fuel rails, and that's one of the things we've been going through this week. So what I'll do, just give me a second here and I'll just get my pages aligned here. One of the considerations obviously that goes along with that is the fuel pump upgrade that we're going to need. There's a variety of ways of doing this, and what we've decided to do, since we've already got the CJ Motorsport's fuel rail kits in there, we're trying to keep it in the family. So I'll jump across to my laptop screen, and this is a product that I understand that CJ Motorsports have only recently recently released, which is their twin pump in-tank setup for the FD RX7. So this is a billet top plate, as we can see here, and it has the ability to run either 1 or 2 in-tank pumps. Now we're going to be using the Walbro 450, which is a pump that is also rated for ethanol. We are going to be running flex fuel on this vehicle, but it allows us to start with 1 pump, which will be more than ample for our initial starting point, and then when we get a little bit hungry for a bit more power, we can simply add in that second pump. So this makes it all nice and neat to install all of that kit, and what it does is it just simply gives us these AN fittings on the top of this plate for our fuel out that's going to run forward into the engine bay, and our fuel return that's going to come back from our fuel pressure regulator. So that makes everything pretty straightforward from that perspective. There are a few more considerations there. CJ Motorsports do offer a nice easy adapter, so you can adapt this straight into the factory fuel lines, and we did consider that, but ultimately we decided it was probably going to be a smarter move for us just to replace the hard lines under the car with some new lines. We're going to be using PTFE lined braided hose, so it's going to be a nice reliable upgrade. We're also going to be going to a larger diameter -8 AN line, which is larger than the factory hard lines. Again, overkill for the moment, but definitely going to work out for us later on once we start punching a little bit more power out of this. Now, there's a couple of things that I wanted to just mention here as well, because this is I've just talked about the flex fuel aspect, and this is something I see quite regularly debated. Just recently there was another debate on a Facebook tuning group about whereabouts to locate the flex fuel or fuel composition sensor in the fuel system, and I think this is honestly something that maybe a few people are overthinking. So I'll just jump across to my laptop screen here and show you the system that we've got plumbed up in our Toyota 86 development car. So there's a lot going on here, and this one's a bit more complicated because it uses port injection and direct injection. So here we've got our Turbo Smart fuel pressure regulator. We've got a return one here and one over here from each of the fuel rails, so this is for the port injection, and then we've got the main return out of the bottom of the regulator sitting here. So that then runs across, as we can see, and it dives into our fuel composition sensor. So clearly in this installation what I've done is I've gone and I've put it on the return line. Now, depending who you talk to, depending what ECU manufacturer you're dealing with, often this is the recommended location, and in most instances, to be perfectly honest, this works absolutely fine. However, it does open you up for one potential problem, and this is the problem where if you are really getting to the absolute limit of your fuel system flow, what you can find is that under very high RPM, high load, where you're using the majority of the fuel that the pumps are supplying, what can happen is that the return back out of the regulator can become a little bit sporadic or a little bit limited. Now, clearly this is a fine line, because if you're getting to the point where you've got no fuel coming out of the regulator return, simply this means your fuel pumps aren't big enough, so there's a bigger problem than your fuel composition sensor. So you should always be getting some flow out of there, but it is a known problem, and the reason why this becomes a problem is that if you're getting sporadic flow through the fuel composition sensor, it will also start reading sporadically. So we don't want that, particularly when our fueling, our boost pressure and our ignition timing are all linked to the output of that fuel composition sensor. Very easy to damage your engine. So really in this situation my answer is just size your fuel system properly, have sufficient flow, you're not going to see an issue. A lot of aftermarket ECUs with flex fuel capability now also include a flex fuel hold function, and essentially what this does is it looks at the output from that flex fuel sensor, and as soon as we go past a certain injector pulse width or maybe RPM and manifold pressure, it'll just hold that ethanol content at a fixed value, preventing that problem if the return line starts to get a little bit sporadic in flow. Alright, this is getting long-winded, but bear with me. The other option of course is that we can put the flex fuel sensor in the pressure line. Now a lot of people are somewhat scared of doing this, and I really don't understand understand it. There's been arguments that they aren't rated for pressure, which is absolute rubbish. This is how they are installed in a lot of OE applications. The other aspect there, which has probably got a little bit more weight behind it, is that yes, in some applications, due to the size of the fuel line running through the flex fuel sensor, these can be somewhat limiting to flow. Probably something I should have actually got my homework done before this webinar. I can't remember off the top of my head what they're rated to, but suffice to say they're going to flow a lot more than the majority of people, particularly in street cars, are going to need. So generally the arguments I hear are completely unnecessary, and running the flex fuel sensor in the pressure line is generally quite acceptable. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing on our FD RX7, which is where I was sort of getting to with that. So I just jump back to my laptop screen. So the way we're plumbing this system here is right here on the right hand side of the picture. This is a feed line, so this is going to be coming forward from the fuel pump. It splits off here, so we've got a little Y section. So this will be a line that runs down to our primary rail here, and essentially then what we've got is these two at the left hand side. These will become returns that will run back to our fuel pressure regulator. And what we're going to do here is loop this one in particular on our secondary rail around. That'll come back to the firewall, and we're going to be mounting that fuel composition sensor up on the firewall. So hopefully that clears up a little bit of confusion around the flex fuel sensor. I know that I do hear a lot about it. Now the next aspect that I want to talk about is the location from the fuel pressure sensor, and this is something I've actually struggled more than you'd probably expect with, and that's just where to locate it in the engine bay. So if we jump across to this picture on my laptop here, so part of our CJ Motorsport's fuel rail kit was this little laser cut bracket that we can see in behind our fuel pressure regulator. So that's designed to mount the fuel pressure regulator up here on the front of the upper inlet manifold, which is fine. Nothing specifically wrong with that. What it does, as we can sort of see here, is it gives us a pretty tight run between our fuel rails and our fuel pressure regulator, and that's going to get a little tricky and a little ugly. Just purely from an aesthetic perspective, which, let's be honest, is still a consideration when we're building a car. I didn't really like the look of it sitting right there, and what I've ended up doing is I'm going to mount it up here on the back of the firewall. Now that actually simplifies my fuel line runs as well, because as I said before, we're going to have a fuel composition sensor mounted about here, and it makes it a really nice straight run from the fuel composition sensor to our return. And also, while you can't see it down below my hand, the return out of the regulator back to the tank is going to run directly straight down, and it's basically taking it back to where our factory fuel lines are going to be running anyway. So just some of those considerations that do require a little bit of thought when we are designing whereabouts in the engine bay certain components are going to go, and a consideration that I have made here, and the angle makes it look a little bit worse. Obviously we've got our fuel filter fitted down here, and we're going to be doing oil changes on this. We definitely don't want to be removing the fuel pressure regulator every time we want to do an oil change. So despite the angle there and the way I've taken this photo, I can confirm that we do have plenty of room to get the oil filter off and perform those oil changes. So hopefully we'll have all of those components mounted up, the sub harnesses designed, and we'll be able to get on with the more interesting part of getting this thing up and running. Now, while I'm at it as well, I just wanted to show you a little bit more progress we've got with the installation of our exhaust manifold. So again, this was required in order to be able to dummy fit everything for our wiring harness construction. So this is our Turblown exhaust manifold sitting here on one of our workbenches, and it is pretty elaborate. So we've got in this shot here, you can see some Inconel heat shielding, and these are molded heat shields. So this is to help combat the known high exhaust gas temperatures or exhaust temperatures in general associated with turbocharged rotary engines. So we really don't want to be melting things in this engine bay, so Inconel heat shielding is going to help there. Now on the top side of this manifold, or the left side, this is going to be facing up when it's installed. We've got our exhaust gas temperature probes, and we've also got a couple of fittings there for our exhaust back pressure. And then on the right hand side, obviously, we've got our two TurboSmart external wastegates. So how that all looks is that once we've got it installed, everything unsurprisingly is incredibly tight, and we've just fortunately got enough room here to clear the wastegate position sensor that's going on the top of this wastegate. But one of the problems we've got here in New Zealand is that this little guy here, our screamer pipe that vents to atmosphere, those aren't legal for road cars here in New Zealand, and this is going to be a bit of a challenge for us because, as you could imagine, there isn't a huge amount of room for us to actually plumb that back into the exhaust, and to add to the complexity there, we've obviously got twin external wastegates. So at some point, and it's certainly not going to be right now, what we're going to end up having to do is try and run that front external wastegate back down over the top of the rear external wastegate. So real fiddly, certainly not looking forward to that. Not going to be a huge amount of fun, but that is a part and parcel of trying to fit a large turbo into a small engine bay. Alright, that's probably enough to do with our RX7 for the moment. What I just wanted to show you before we carry on with our webinar is that we have just released another video over on our YouTube channel, so we'll just head across over there, and if you are not already following, subscribe to our YouTube channel, please make sure you do so. We do really bring out some great content and we release videos every week. So while we were over at Texas 2K, we caught up with Jay from Real Street, and Jay's one of those guys out there in the industry that I think shares a lot of our own passions of educating and improving the level of knowledge out there in the industry. Really love his Jay's Tech Tips series of videos. However, he practices what he preaches, and he was there supporting a couple of cars, in particular the white JZA80 Supra in this video that ended up cleaning up the 2JZ class at TX2K. So got the opportunity to talk to Jay about what makes this car tick, about his tuning strategies, about the use of automatic transmissions in this race class and how to make those work with a relatively small capacity engine and a very large turbo that's necessary when you want to punch out 2,500 horsepower from a 3-litre. So if you are interested in learning a little bit more about the Real Street Supra, head across to our YouTube channel, and while you're there, please make sure you subscribe. Last but certainly not least, we are still running our Wiseco piston giveaway. So if you are contemplating an engine build for your project car and you're thinking about piston options for it, this is the perfect opportunity to get your name in the drawer. You never know, you could end up with a free set of Wiseco shelf stock pistons. So those pistons are any of their shelf stock parts, so as long as you're dealing with something that's semi-popular, there's a pretty good chance that Wiseco already support that with off-the-shelf pistons. Now, on top of the piston kit, which will be shipped anywhere in the world, you're also going to get access to a suite of our engine building courses, so you're going to know exactly what to do with those pistons and how to assemble your engine, making sure you get professional results, optimal power, optimal torque, while most importantly getting great engine reliability. So I'll get the team to drop a link in the comments that you can follow if you want to get your name into the draw there, and there are a few other tasks that you can complete to get yourself more entries into that draw and get yourself more chance of winning that piston set. Alright, thanks for watching there. Give us a few moments and we will get started with today's webinar. If you like that video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you're not already a subscriber, make sure you're subscribed. We release a new video every week. And if you like free stuff, we've got a great deal for you. Click the link in the description to claim your free spot to our next live lesson.